So I'd just like to say a massive thank you to both our speakers here tonight. Tonight we are debating the issue of Europe. The motion is that this House believes that Britain would be better off out of the European Union. On my left, on the proposition, you have Gawain Towler. He's a York alumni, UKIP press manager, and employee of the European Parliament's Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy group. He was a UKIP MEP candidate for the South West, only just missing out on being an MEP. And on opposing the motion, we have to my right, Edward Macmillan-Scott. He's a former Conservative MEP. He moved to the Liberal Democrats over the issue of Europe in 2010. He was MEP for Yorkshire and the Humber for 30 years and was elected 4 times as the European Parliament's Vice President. His main portfolio is human rights and democracy. So just to go over how tonight's debate will run, each speaker will have 7 minutes to give their opening statements. At 6 minutes, I will bang once on the table, and then at 7 minutes, I will keep banging until you stand down. The current vote stands at abstaining 11, for the motion, so we should leave the European Union at 37, and against the motions, we should stay within the European Union at 67. The winner of tonight's event, you have 67 votes, and you have 37 votes.
Oh, good. It's so very the same as the country.
Okay, so the winner of tonight's event will be the side which has changed the most minds, and we hope that you will vote on the quality of the arguments made here tonight and not on your own personal preference. And please do join us on Twitter, so at York Union with the hashtag EUYork. I will be reading questions out from Twitter, so it's good to get on it. And without further ado, I'd invite Gowain Towler of the proposition to go first.
Thank you very much. Rather jolly to be back. I've been back apart from an accidental visit to the Charles XII a few weeks ago, where I was inveigled into doing this. I haven't been back for about 20 odd years. And I don't think Edward remembers, but he's why I'm a Eurosceptic. I was, for my sins, the chairman of York Tories at the time, sometime about 1991, and the Tory party had their spring conference at Harrogate. And I was sitting talking to Edward's then agent when it was before it was a PR election, so it was when you had the sort of first past the post constituency of North Yorkshire or something. And I was a very strange young fellow in that I'd actually read the Maastricht Treaty. The Home Secretary, Ken Clarke at the time, hadn't. It was his responsibility. He hadn't read it. He felt a bit beneath him. But I had, because I was a bit of an anorak. And I noticed something that I thought was very peculiar in a document that purported to be legal and democratic. And that was that within the Maastricht Treaty, the term irrevocable appeared 16 times. Now, in my rather naive way, I presume that in a democracy, nothing is irrevocable. Everything can be overturned by a vote of the people. A parliament can create law, but it cannot bind a future parliament. That, to me, is the very essence of democracy. So I was a bit perplexed by this. And I was chatting to the agent in the bar, as always, and he said, don't ask me, I don't know anything about this European stuff, but Edward's coming over. Ask him, he's the MEP. I'd never met Mr. Macmillan-Scott at that point. And so I did. And I remember saying very, very clearly, I said, thank you very much, Mr. Macmillan-Scott. And he said, this young man's got a question for you, Edward. This young man's got a question for you. And I said, right, listen, before I say anything, you can't say they don't mean it, because it's a legal document. And sure enough, I asked Edward, why has it got the word irrevocable in it 16 times? And he went, oh, it doesn't, they don't mean it. And at that point, I just thought, you know, this doesn't wash. It's easy, but at that point, I just came to the conclusion, it doesn't wash. Now, after that, I stayed with the Tories. I believed the idea of you can be in Europe but not run by Europe. Oh, how I learned. And I then took a job many years later working in the European Parliament, working on for a chap called Nurj Deva, who was doing the brief on humanitarian aid. development policy, stuff of that sort. And I worked very closely with Edward at that time in the 2000-2001. But after that, after sitting in the European Parliament office, I was a bit like Doubting Thomas. I actually needed to put my fingers into the bleeding side of the European Union to realise that we could not reform it. And I saw this stuff coming across my desk, day in, day out. And I finally came to the conclusion that this great slogan, in Europe, not run by Europe, just didn't work. If you're in Europe, you're run by Europe. That's the bottom line. Now, you've got two calls there. Either you say, fine, okay, we're in Europe, let's put our shoulders to the wheel, let's take a full part, let's be committed, wholehearted Europeans. Or you take the opposite view, which is, sod this for a game of soldiers, this doesn't work, it is so counter to our ideas of democracy and society that we have to leave. I came to the second conclusion, others have come to the first. Both are honourable positions. And at that point I went off and did my own thing, and Farah met me at the pub someday and said, boy, you take, I was privatised correspondent in Brussels, and he basically said, you take the mick, you're a journalist, you're a Eurosceptic, will you work for me? And it took me about that much of a pint to say yes. So that was in 2004, and I've been working for UKIP ever since. It's been a great deal of fun. And in that period of time, the position and the concept of leaving the European Union has gone from a very small, niche, dare I say, fruitcake opinion, to something that is now held by a majority of people in this country. Now, it's 67-30, what was the numbers?
37.
67-37. It's 2/3, 1/3 here, in the direction of staying in the European Union. However, in the country, it's not. There was an opinion poll recently that stated quite clearly that the move against Europe has reduced. As UKIP's rise has risen, people are getting more keen on staying. But if you actually drill down into those figures, it's 56% of this country would like to stay if we returned just to a free trade zone. What was signed up in 1974? That is not on the table. That's just not an option. Not if you're part of Europe, it isn't. Because with the European Union, doesn't just come the free trade ideas, which we all, I think most people would agree, the reduction of barriers between trade between countries in the European Union, that's great. But it also comes a whole tranche of other things. Why do we need a free trade zone, or why do we need an organisation like the European Union to tell us how many men are allowed to hold the bottom of a ladder? Why do we need the European Union to tell us how long a farmer can sit on a tractor before his bottom wobbles enough so his spine's in trouble? I reckon that the tractor driver, the farmer, is far better qualified to decide how many hours he works in the field and how long he sits on a tractor than some chap in an office in Brussels. So it just doesn't work. And I think what has been very telling is ask yourself a basic question. If you were asked the question today, should we join the European Union with all the 180,000 pages of regulations and laws that come with it, would you say yes? And I would suggest very clearly that you wouldn't. Because there is so much problematic about it. There are so many difficulties with it that this is just not something a free country would do. Now, I'm not saying of that 180,000 documents or pages of law that we would not agree with probably 40,000 pages of it. Much of it is very sensible legislation. Thank you. However, that was the quickest minute I've ever seen in my life.
I banned a minute ago.
Oh, in which case, I'm very sorry. I'm deaf.